how to introduce this gentleman properly. It's not that I don't know him. It's that he needs no introduction. This guy is one of the guys that I go way back with. We've both been working here for God knows how long. We've been here for what seems like an eternity. We seem to swim around in the same circles with lots of things. And if you've been anywhere near NetApp in the last, 20 years, you know this man. So welcome to the show, Mr. Matt Watts.
Hey, Nick.
Thank you for joining me, Matt.
It's great to be here.
It's
Thanks
great
for
to
the
see
invite.
you again, man.
It's been a while. We don't catch up often enough. So
every other year at San Jose, we bump into each other
pretty much
randomly,
feels like
but yeah.
Which would have meant 19 and a half times, right? Based on my tendency at NetApp, okay?
Right. I've been here since 2011. When did you join?
2005, May 2005.
Man, you got me by 6 years.
No catching up there.
Nobody's catching Gebhardt or any of those other guys at this point,
that's
right?
True, yeah.
Matt, I wanted to chat with you here to sort of close out the first day because today's theme has been all about AI.
Yes.
And I almost want to have kind of a theoretical, philosophical conversation with you here to close out the day rather than something technical.
Okay.
Because I look at this and I say a third of this is technical. 2/3 of this Mount Everest-sized thing that we're about to climb in the industry, and it's going to take, I think, many years to crest and figure out exactly what we can do with this new superpower that we've stumbled over our heels backwards into over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Where do you land on, obviously we've talked a lot throughout the show today about the technical nature of it, the skills gaps, those sorts of things, but on a philosophical level, is this the right move that companies need to be doing at this time, and why?
Yeah, so that is a great philosophical debate, which I wish I had my glass of wine here. We could really talk it through.
We'll do that later.
Yeah, I mean, look, I wrote a book recently, and one of the expressions that I kind of use in the book is it's about managing ripples and riding waves.
Yeah.
And, ripples are those kind of things that are just, regular progress of technology. And whilst they're really important, they're just things that we sort of have to deal with. Whereas waves are those kind of moments where you can suddenly create multi-billion-dollar, even trillion-dollar opportunities.
Right.
And I think AI has that potential.
I do too.
I think we're on the very crest of what Gartner would call the peak of inflated expectations. I think people are looking at AI as this special snowflake, this kind of uber technology that's going to, transform the world. It's going to. And I think, that is a use case. There are going to be companies out there that are going to find new drug discoveries. They're going to do some really incredible things. I think the reality is, in the short to medium term, most companies are going to get productivity improvements. And I think that's where we're going to start to see the real use cases is, if I can make your developers 30% more productive, if I can make your marketing teams 20, 30% more productive, what's the impact of that?
Yeah.
So I think that's that sort of... It's the reality, the what do they call it? The plateau of enlightenment, I think Gartner call it, right?
There's the early adopter stuff and then the plateau that you get, right?
So yes, I think the reality is companies, people listening to this, start to think more about what are those kind of productivity use cases, because I think those are going to be some of the short-term wins that are going to have some of the really kind of interesting opportunities and impacts.
I see this through two different lenses, honestly, if I can waffle for a second. I look at this through the lens of the consumer and what we're exposed to on the consumer side, the chat GPTs, the content creation assistants, things like that. I wonder how much of that is going to translate into those same people bringing it into the enterprise or bringing that expectation into the enterprise. I think the more people use and leverage chat GPT that maybe aren't technicians or technically proficient, I think they're going to bring some of those expectations. We see Microsoft doing it with Copilot in Office. So I think some of the adoption curve stuff is going to happen organically just by virtue of consumers using it openly in the market.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to bring those expectations in, which will drive that level of innovation that will force some IT departments to develop RAG solutions so that they can do the same thing they're doing with Office 365 with their own data, for example, right? And I think that's going to take a couple of years. I think we're already a couple of years into it, because we've seen the adoption and the skyrocketing of Copilot and ChatGPT over the last year or so, especially. but I think this is really going to take off between the next 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, it's really interesting, to sort of carry on the sort of slightly philosophical debate. I met with a company fairly recently, and we were sort of talking about staffing and where they thought they would need to invest time and money and effort and bring resources in. And I remember the guy saying to me, he said, "We're going to need a lot more programmers for the future." And I said, "I'm not so sure." I said, "I think you're going to need a lot less programmers in the future."
Yeah.
Because they were still thinking about a very traditional kind of, we need developers to write code, we need developers to do this. And I actually think ChatGPT is your developer.
Yeah.
So I think as you say, as we start to embrace these technologies at home, I use, not on NetApp equipment, but I use ChatGPT in my personal life for a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah.
It will be very odd for me to come into work and not be able to do some of those things because I don't have access to that technology. So I think there will be peer pressure, consumer pressure that will force companies to realize
we've seen that before.
We have seen that
Whether
before.
it was bring your own device or remote desktops or whatever it might be.
I mean, hell, if you go back far enough,
Yeah.
there were an awful lot of companies that didn't even give you access to the internet.
Yeah.
So you go home in the evening, you'd be playing on the internet, you come to work, and you have no access. I mean,
No,
what
you
is
got
that
your,
all about,
your
right?
dumb terminal green screen, right? That's
Exactly.
your work, no internet.
So I think you're right. I think as technology becomes more and more pervasive in our personal lives, it creates that expectation of,
why
our
can't I use this at work?
Yeah, and your company also, if you're not careful, your company also starts to look a little bit old-fashioned. If you come into work and you're not able to use some of these technologies, what does that say about you as an organization to a younger generation that you're trying to bring into your company, that for them, these are native technologies that they use every single hour of every single day, right?
Yeah. I love this conversation. This is my favorite one I've had yet, and I'm glad we're sort of closing the day out on it because I think it's one of the most important.
Yeah.
I think there needs to be that war room that happens in every IT department at every company. You gotta get a stack of pizzas, and you guys got to get a whiteboard and lock yourselves in a conference room and figure out what it is you want to do with an AI.
Yeah.
Not just say we need an AI.
Yeah. Well, otherwise we're in danger of repeating the 2000s, the
Exactly.
.com. Everybody needs to be on the internet. Everybody needs a website. Everybody needs this. And I remember living through that. I am that old, right?
Yes.
But I remember as we kind of got towards the .com boom, people were just buying huge amounts of equipment because they all felt like they had to be in this .com thing.
Yeah.
I remember loads of that equipment never even left warehouses. It was literally stockpiled with the distribution companies, ready to go to sites, to people who didn't really even know what they were going to use it for. They just didn't want to be left behind. So I think you're right. You need a war room. And in fairness, I remember, this is going back about 4 or 5 months ago, George Kurian brought a group of us together. There was about 35 or 40 of us, some people like me who are more of the sort of interested observers, the futurists, but then a whole group of people who were looking at AI. And I remember he walked into the room and the very first thing he said was, the companies that get this right will be 30% more productive than the ones that don't.
Absolutely.
You cannot survive if your competitor is 30% more productive than you are.
He said it today in the keynote too, $7 trillion productivity increase over the next, 10 years, I think?
Absolutely. So you can't
monumental.
Ignore that. Yeah, you can't ignore that. So, and I think that's where it's getting interesting for me, is that we've started to move beyond the hero workloads, the solving cancer, which are great things, but they're the exclusivity of the very, very top kind of 2, 3, 4% of organizations. We're now starting to see the reality of, every organization starting to look at, okay, but what's the use case for me? And like I say, I think your idea of, companies need to create a war room of different individuals to start saying, okay, how do we start to bring these improvements, these productivity improvements to life across lots of different areas of our business.
And be creative. Brainstorm. Bring all the heads of departments together and be like, how would you like to use AI? Where could you use the most help?
Yeah.
What if you could do X, Y, Z? What would that help? Have those conversations, because those are going to be the big things that will help you to solidify what your path forward is.
Yeah.
And I don't think enough of that's happening. I think there's a lot of excitement about all of the new technology and hardware, and oh my God, right? Mm-hmm. But there's also a lot of sticker shock around the price and the cost. And I know something that's near and dear to you, we talked about earlier, sustainability has profound impacts on sustainability and carbon footprint. So I look at this, again, through two different lenses. There's the consumer excitement of, I can use ChatGPT to write my next email.
Yep.
And then there's the actual, what's the word I'm looking for? The weight of what it was going to take to implement a proper RAG solution.
I agree.
Properly.
And if I tie those two things together, because you talked about sustainability, right?
Yeah.
We are at the beginning of a data explosion because of AI, right? It's been pretty big up until now. You've heard me talk about the global data sphere by 2030 is going to be 1 yottabyte of data, right? So it's massive. Now that's everything created by everything. But even in data centers, the amount of data that we're creating, it's 1 to 2% of the world's electricity by 2030 will be powering storage devices.
Wow.
Which is just mind-blowing.
I can't even get my head around that.
But then there's the other statistics. So thinking about it from a sustainability perspective, the numbers are about 68% of the data that we create is never ever used again after it's created.
Yeah.
So I look at that from a sustainability angle, but how do you solve that? And I also think that maybe that's a use case. If I could vectorize that data and point a large language model at it, what could I go and ask of that data that I'm currently doing nothing with at all? What could we learn from it? What could we find out from that data? And if we can't find out anything from it, does that now give me a target to be able to reduce the impact of it, to move it somewhere, to, God forbid, delete it, right?
Does the data become less useful?
Does the data become less useful? Because now you've squeezed all of the value out of it.
Yeah.
And if you keep looking at it, you keep asking it questions through RAG, and you're not getting any useful information back, you kind of wrung that as much as you can. So I think you're then in a better position to say, do we even need this? So
Yeah.
I think AI has the potential to, whilst it will create a lot more data, I think it offers a potential to help us solve some of the data waste problem that we've got.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of fascinating use case for me.
I think part of what you were just describing for me as well is you have to get past novelty. So it's cool to point it at your backups from 1998.
Yeah.
How useful is that? It's not really.
No.
It's cool. It's kind of cool that you can still pull all that stuff up and query against it and see what it was in Betty Sue's spreadsheet in accounting in 1998.
Yeah.
It's not useful. And for some reason we keep a lot of that stuff around is for audits and things like that. But at the same time, I look at it as like, how do you determine what's useful and not? I don't know that we've figured that out yet. I look at things like what Chris went over in the keynote today as the global namespaces and then throwing classification on top of that or within that. And that's going to be able to give you a sorting and filtering mechanism to be able to look through, all right, access, how many times has it been accessed? You can really start to drill down into how it's being used, or if not at all. And then you can make a kind of a decision an informed decision about what to do with it.
And the challenge, one of the challenges is going to be the same challenge that we've bounced around for the last 40 plus years, which is who actually owns the data and is going to make that decision. Because, we've both been in this industry for a little while. If you go and talk to the application teams, they say, well, it's not our data, it's the IT guys own the data.
Yeah.
And you go and talk to the IT guys and they say, no. We're just the custodians of the data. At some point, companies or somebody within an organization is going to have to take responsibility, because we can't keep storing 2/3 or more data that is single use, consuming vast amounts of power that has no value to businesses. So I think AI offers us an opportunity, but I think it's still going to come down to who inside an organization is going to be authorized, approved, trusted to make a decision about what do we actually keep. And we haven't solved it for the last 40 years. I'm not sure how we solve it for the next.
It's a good point that still needs to be solved. I'll throw an example out there, and we can sort of rap about this for a second to close things out. Where does the responsibility lie, going back to the sustainability angle? So if individual companies manage their own data, what about the service providers? What about the social media networks that have petabytes of photos and historical messages, posts, videos, whatever they may have, from 2007?
Yeah.
How much do we really need to keep that stuff? So I guess what I'm saying is the responsibility on the user of those platforms to kind of manicure and curate that data as needed, or is the responsibility on the services and the platforms themselves to kind of nudge the user to, hey, do you really still need this?
So, my sort of feeling is that they can't fix that problem, right? The reality is it sits with whoever is the owner of the data. So I think what we'll see with the big service providers, the hyperscale providers, the big social media networks, is they will drive towards powering the things that they do with renewable energy. And they've got a long way to go. Let's be completely frank about that. They have a stated ambition to be running off renewables. There's a lot of work still to be done.
Yeah.
So I think for them, their view will be, actually, we don't care. You know, if you're storing it, you're paying for it, you're using it, as long as we're powering that technology with renewable energy, actually, there isn't an emissions problem that we need to solve. I think the challenge is going to be with companies who run data centers, data cupboards.
Yeah.
Cupboards.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah, but my other favorite one is somebody said to me, "What is a data center?" And I said, for most organizations, it's a museum of past IT decisions.
Right.
Which they are. So I think there's a huge number of companies that are going to struggle to be running off completely renewable energy. So they're going to have to look at optimization strategies. They're going to have to look at how do we reduce the carbon footprint, not just of data. You know, servers are 40% of power consumption. You know, so I think it's going to be a real mix of different strategies, but I think the big ones, the hyperscale providers, the big social media companies, they have to start looking at and seriously using almost 100% renewable energy, and that will be the way that they solve for the problem.
I think that's one of the ways, absolutely. I look at hydroelectric power as potentially coming up as getting a bit of a renaissance. I know nuclear is going through a bit of a renaissance right now.
Little small nuclear reactors.
I do think that. I was talking to, I think it was John Woodall. I was talking about it earlier. I think now that we've sort of unlocked fusion a little bit, I think we can now look at, okay, what's the world look like in 10 years when everyone has a tiny fusion reactor in their garage?
Yeah.
Powering their house, powering their electric vehicles. Right? That's kind of crazy to think about that's possible.
But Microsoft just recently appointed a head of nuclear power research. Yep. So, you know, those big companies...
they bought and are powering up 3 Mile Island again, which...
There you go.
It's debatable whether that's smart or not, but I guess we're going to find out.
That's right. Yeah, but you know, I think things like that are going to be interesting.
Yeah.
You know, if you go to... I was talking about how much power is consumed by data centers, just because it fascinated me. In Ohio, right now, there are 90 data centers that are currently on hold that have not been granted permission by the state.
This is aside from the Intel fabs that are being built there?
That's right, yeah. Aside from all of that, there are 90 data centers. There's more that are in progress. There's about 270 that are planned, but there are 90 that are currently on hold. Those 90 are really... The reason they're on hold is because Ohio does not have a power network that is robust enough, that has enough energy in it to be able to power these 90 data centers. So you immediately think, well, what's the power consumption of 90 data centers? 20 million homes. 90 data centers is the equivalent of powering 20 million residential properties.
Then why aren't we building data centers out in the middle of, I don't know, the flyover states where there's no, I don't want to say civilization, but I mean, like, there's so much like vast empty land out there. I feel like Amazon did a really good job of like taking advantage of some of that for placing their giant distribution centers and stuff, and it kind of helped jobs locally as well. So I look at that like, why are we trying to cram them all into Ohio? Not exactly the largest of states, but I love the fact that it's bringing technology and technology work to areas like that. But at the same time, I think, aren't there ways that we could... one of the things I heard Microsoft was talking about was they wanted to have, for every data center or every pool of data centers, an accompanying nuclear reactor they were going to build with it. This is one of their philosophies going forward, which I love. Thank you, Microsoft, for taking that approach. I think it's going to take stuff like that to get to these 270, you said?
There's I think it's about 270 that are sort of in the works.
Just in Ohio?
Just in Ohio. And of which 90 are currently on hold. And there's a whole political case that's going through at the moment because the power companies are effectively saying, for us to build an infrastructure to power that quantity of data centers, you need to make a payment and a commitment of 75%. In fact, they're asking for 90% of the power you're going to use over, let's say, a 10-year term. We need that up front in order to justify the investment that we will need to make into the grid.
So that we can deliver that.
So that we can deliver it, right? Yeah. So it's fascinating. I mean, anybody who's watching this, you drive down a motorway or you drive down the freeway and you can see a data center. They're fairly distinctive, right? Next time you drive past one, just realize that one data center is probably consuming about as much power as a small town. Yeah. It's probably 10, 20, 30, 40,000 people. Yeah. That one warehouse. You know, and most of this is not coming from renewables, and data is a huge part of the problem. And, you know, we're saying with AI, it's not just data. AI requires a lot of compute. The racks inside these systems now, or inside these data centers, you know, we used to build sort of 7 kilowatt racks. Now we're building 150, 200 kilowatt racks. I mean, it's staggering, right?
It's crazy. And we used to, and this is literally what I started out doing in the late 90s. Was installing generators and running into transformers and PDUs.
And standing on the roof of a data center spraying it with...
No, I wasn't doing that. I never did that. We did push a Sun V880 off of a parking deck one time. That was a fun story. I'll tell you guys about that one sometime.
I almost dropped you in it then, didn't I?
Yes. No, looking at the numbers that we used to use, so you typically see like your PDUs have 20 amp, 30 amp breaker kind of settings on them. I think this is going to spur even more than that as we start to evolve the way power delivery happens in data centers. We're going to need new PDUs. We're going to need new power cables that are capable of delivering that level of electricity. The new Vino system, or the new systems that we launched earlier this year, have 2,000 watt power supplies in them.
Right.
4 of them per pair.
Yeah.
And I'm going, now they're smart, they're very efficient, they only power up what they actually need. Side note.
Yeah.
But that is 8,000 watts of power available at your fingertips should you decide to turn it up to 11.
Yeah.
And that's just a 3U storage system.
Yeah, and it still relatively pales in comparison to some of the big GPU devices, you know, that are out there as well. So
you stick that thing next to an H100 and
and it's going to lead to all sorts of interesting things as well. We're going to start to see, you know, liquid cooling, and, you know, immersion cooling seems to be making a little bit of a comeback around certain things as well. So, you know, but I'm straying way off topic here. But
I love this conversation though. This is so I want to let's wrap things up with a couple of plugs. You were recently on a show on Amazon called The Futurist, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that? What was that like?
That was one of the most fun projects I've been involved with. I got into the whole sustainability thing about 4 or 5 years ago. Part of my looking to the future about what do we need to start paying some attention to. And I kind of incubated that inside NetApp, brought a lot of people together and, you know, just tried to get more people excited about the topic and really thinking about the topic. And it's been great to see so many people from so many parts of NetApp so enthusiastic. I'm kind of wanting to be part of this sustainability thing. You know, that's been great. But then we had a call from our PR agency saying Ian Khan's been in touch, who's the futurist, and he wants to do a show around sustainability. Is it something NetApp want to get involved with? So we came up with this idea of let's talk about our partnership with Aston Martin Formula One. And of course, most people think, Formula One, sustainability? How do you match those two things together?
Right.
But for those of you who don't know, Formula One is on a goal to be completely net zero by 2030.
Yep.
And that's not just the teams, that's the circuits. That's everybody coming to the circuits. And so we sort of looked at it, and it was part of the reason we decided to work with Aston Martin was how cool would that be to be part of a sport that so many hundreds of thousands of people love and be part of that journey to help making it sustainable. And that was the episode. We did this whole episode on Amazon Prime Video with Ian Khan, the futurist, around the work that we're doing with Aston Martin. And it's we went to the factory, we shot at the factory, we met the CIO, Claire Lansley. Honestly, so to have been through the kind of journey that I've been on over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, and then to sort of end it, because I'm really starting to try and move on to other things now, but to sort of end it by doing that episode, you know, showcasing the work that we've been doing, showcasing the partnership with Aston Martin Formula One, for me was just like a dream come true. It was just one of those amazing moments. Yeah.
I haven't got to see it yet. I'm really looking forward to it. We've been doing a lot of planning with this, but
cool.
I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I'm excited about it. My boss, Paul Vanderlingen, is also...
He's in it as well.
Yep. He's also a part of it, so shout out to Paul. Thank you very much for telling me about that. I'm looking forward to seeing you guys doing that stuff. And I think F1 is an interesting one, because it's not one you would think of, but the amount of data that goes into some of those, into motorsport in general, is insane at this point. The amount of sensors that are... There's something like 1,000 sensors on each one of those cars. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And what you have to realize as well, you know, as we were talking to Claire and we were talking to the team over there are just things you don't realize. Our equipment, because we ship, it's flex pods that we have.
Yeah.
They're one of the few things that actually shipped with the car. So there's very little else that ships with the car. Everything else goes separately. But the FlexPods ship with the car. And the reason they ship with the car is they can't start the car without the mini data centers at trackside.
What? I had no idea.
So literally our equipment ships with them. So part of what we're doing with them isn't just about being, storing more data in less space. It's about how do we reduce weight. So we've also gone on, our efficiency is more than just saving money. It's about every disk we can take out is kilograms that come off the logistics, that come off the freight when these things have to ship. So yeah, every time they ship a car to circuit or the cars to circuit, there is a FlexPod, a mini data center that goes with them and ships. And it's like I say, it's the only thing that ships with the cars.
That's really cool.
So that's pretty cool.
You mentioned earlier you wrote a book. Tell the people about the book, if you don't mind, because I'm really looking forward to reading it as well.
Yeah, so I mean that was another kind of really interesting project for me because I've struggled with writing. I didn't pass English language at school, English literature, but I've sort of got better over the years doing blogs and things like that. And I sat down over the course of 2 or 3 months and just wrote everything that was in my head, and with no structure to it or anything else. And the more I wrote, the more I started to realize there was a pattern emerging, and you could start to group a lot of the stuff I was writing into sort of 2 or 3 categories. So initially, going back 6 or 9 months ago, the book was called The Third Wave, and we never published it. It was just a book that we used internally for kind of internal education and stuff like that. And then, of course, AI happened.
Yeah.
And particularly in November last year, the ChatGPT, suddenly 200 million AI users. So I updated it, and I wrote this whole section around AI being the 4th wave. We included some bits on sustainability and all those sorts of topics. And we just thought, what the hell, let's publish it. So it's on Amazon.
What was the first wave? Humor me, I'm curious, in your mind.
So there'll be a lot of people watching this that probably weren't even born during the first wave. So for me, it was modularization.
Okay.
It was the shift from the sort of the monolithic technologies. Yeah.
Or the modern transistor, probably.
It was going from, if you remember back to the days, EMC had Symmetrics and HDS Lightnings, these big, beautiful pieces of technology, but massively inflexible, hugely expensive. So I think the first wave for me was the move towards modular, kind of rack-based type equipment, which is what we all depend on nowadays.
Yep.
The second wave, virtualization, and I say virtualization because you had a choice at the beginning, Citrix, VMware, Hyper-V, KVM. We landed on VMware, for good or for bad, probably a separate discussion. Third wave being cloud, because I think, and the waves for me are truly disruptive. I said earlier on, it's about managing ripples and riding waves.
Yeah.
You have to manage the ripples because they're a natural part of you growing your business. But if you can spot a wave, it offers you a multi-billion-dollar potential, both as a user, as a company that's operating in the space, or as a tech vendor like ourselves.
Yeah.
It was a rewarding process because, again, being somebody who was never very good at writing, to be able to get a book, albeit a small book, out and published and call myself an author was just it was just personally really gratifying.
Well, where can people grab a copy if they're interested in reading it? Are they available here at the show as well?
We did a book signing today.
Nice.
So we gave away a bunch of copies today. We're going to try and schedule another book signing on Wednesday, so we'll give away another few copies. If people are interested, it's on Amazon.
Okay.
So you can download the Kindle version.
Kindle
you
book.
can get a softback. The special hardback edition, which is particularly cool as well.
Are you going to do an audiobook, a narration?
I've been asked, and
you have a good voice for it. You should.
So I think to an American audience, maybe that's the case.
Oh.
But I don't know. I think it's tempting, but I don't know. Maybe if we get enough requests, then
you heard him, guys. Send in those requests if you want. If you're going to get Matt Watts' book, The Fourth Wave, make sure you send him a note and say he wants you to, or you want him to narrate the audiobook. Matt, this has been fantastic. I always love hanging out with you and talking with you. They are some of the most philosophical conversations sometimes, but usually have the most weight to them as well, and I really appreciate it. Anything else you want to leave with the people before we get out of here for the day?
I don't think so. I think they probably had enough of me droning on about various bits and pieces. I just, look, I'll leave you with this. I just think, I think embracing new things is just so fundamental, and it's something that as I get older, it becomes easier to dismiss things because, it requires change, it requires us to adapt, to evolve, and sometimes we don't see the value. So I'll leave you with a quote.
Okay.
And it was from Douglas Adams, who Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the quote isn't "Don't panic." He has this expression. He said, "Everything that exists in the world when you're born is normal," which really gets you thinking. But he then goes on to say, everything that comes along between the age of 15 and 35 is an opportunity, and potentially you can build your career around it.
Yeah.
But everything that comes along after you're 35 will bring about the end of the world and must be completely rejected.
Yes.
And I love that expression because every time I see something new and maybe I don't perceive the value, or maybe I almost want to dismiss it, I constantly have that in my head, which reminds me, just because something doesn't have value to me doesn't mean it doesn't have value.
Yeah, our natural inclination at this age is to go, no, hold on, whoa, hang on. But to someone that's 24, 25, that's new in the industry, that can see that vision of the future.
I agree.
That we used to 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think that sometimes we need to just get out of our own way.
Yeah.
And enable them.
Exactly. And that's, so I think that's a good kind of point to leave things with you. It's just, it's difficult, but we just constantly have to embrace change. The reality is all of these things are going to happen with or without us, and it's much more fun if it happens with you.
Absolutely. Matt, thank you so much, man. Really appreciate you taking all the extra time, and I'm going to close things out, but go have a beer, and I'll come find you in a little bit.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. Thanks again, Nick.
Thanks, Matt.
Much appreciated.